Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our panel presentation, Getting to Know Garnet Families. Thank you to all of you in the physical room with me here in Seton Academic Center at Mount St. Vincent University, and those of you who are joining us from afar online. So I will begin with a land acknowledgement, and then I'll move into some opening remarks. We will have an opportunity to get to know our panelists and the other members of this team better. So the land acknowledgement. Mount St. Vincent University is located in Kachiptuk, Halifax, part of Mi'kma'ki, the unceded ancestral territory which remains the homeland of the Mi'kma'ki, the first people of this land for over 13,000 years. This territory is covered by the covenant chain of treaties of peace and friendship signed between 1725 and 1779. These treaties are affirmed by the Supreme Court of Canada and recognize Aboriginal title, which is embedded in both the 1763 Royal Proclamation and in Section 35.1 of the 1982 Constitution Act. The treaties are living agreements that establish the rules for ongoing treaty relationships between nations. Today, we pay respect to the knowledge embedded in the Mi'kma'ki custodians of the lands and waters, and to the elders past, present, and future. So, yes, my name is Deborah Norris, and I am one of the members of the team that is facilitating this panel this evening, and which is embedded within the very first inaugural Family Science Garnet Family Science Summer Institute. So I'm going to begin by offering a welcome to our panelists who are assembled here to my right. I'd like to take a few minutes to take the opportunity to have the audience get to know you. So let's start with you, Sarah. Please tell us a little bit about where you're coming from and how you're connected to the Garnet families community.
I have been working for 17 years at Ottawa Police Service in different variety of roles as a civilian member. I had been on the side of my desk sort of working a lot on wellness and helping members and their families, including helping with the peer support program. And I also did some charity work outside of that as well with the Ottawa First Responder Foundation. And they created a position within our wellness unit called the Wellness Resource Liaison that was after the coroner's report on police suicides. And they realized there was a gap missing to have that bridge between membership that were struggling or off and the families as well, and with the service. So in that role, I started working in our wellness unit. And that was about 3 years ago. I'm also a spouse myself, and we've had plenty of our own experiences with being a Garnet family, and I have found that has been really helpful in the role that I do at OPS as well.
Thank you, Sarah. So now, Jim, your turn. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I am a St. John's Regional Firefighter in St. John's, Newfoundland. I've been on the job for 24 years, currently serving as the rank of a fire lieutenant. And I am involved with the International Association of Firefighters. I'm the union vice president, and also the vice president of the Atlantic Provinces Professional Firefighters Association as well. And what brought me to the Garnet family, I guess, group was in 2018, I was diagnosed with a cancer diagnosis, kidney cancer, renal cell carcinoma, in May, and then in October, I was hit again with a second diagnosis of melanoma, to which I'm still dealing with today. Doing great, feeling healthy, but certainly want to keep the advocacy at the forefront for our members, for a safer work environment, and also to ensure that they have the resources that are necessary in case this happens to another member. And you know, we learn a lot when an event happens, and hopefully we learn from it, and then we are able to provide those necessary resources to our members and their families if they're unfortunately get another cancer disease or even a PTSD, behavioral health issue. We have to make sure that I said it this morning, it's imperative that we get a healthy firefighter to the end of their career and then be able to enjoy the rest of life after the fire service. But we have to get them there and get them there. Not only to get them there, but we have to get them there healthy.
Thank you very much, Jim. Now, Hillary.
Hello, I'm Hillary. I'm from PEI. I've been a paramedic on the island now for about 12 years. For the past 3 years, I've also been working on a mobile mental health crisis team. And I've also been flown up north, and I've worked northern Manitoba as well in the northern remote Indigenous communities, on and off for 3 years as well. I've connected with one of the team members here of Garnet Families at one of our conferences that we had on the island for paramedics and healthcare workers. And they asked me to speak at this event, so I would love to connect more and bring that home to my coworkers and the families. That's probably one of my biggest passions of being a paramedic at this point, is the mental wellness of myself, my coworkers, and the families that are involved.
Well, thank you all three. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Heidi Cram, who's going to talk to you about Garnet families.
Thanks so much to our panelists and to Dr. Norris for kicking this off. Thanks to our audience here today, and also those of you who are joining us online. So I have so much to tell you about Garnet Families and how we got to this point of running this inaugural Family Science Summer Institute. I think that we've learned a lot as researchers. I should say that I'm also a spouse of a public safety personnel that has really informed the work that I do and really enriched the lenses through which I can actually appreciate what's happening for families across the spectrum of Garnet. And so when we think about Garnet and how we got to Garnet, it's been a bit of a process over the past more than a decade to really get here and to build this kind of collective community about what it is we want to do as researchers and how we see ourselves as being able to provide really service to this community through our research. And so for us, it's often quite personal. Many of us in the field are quite connected, shaped by this in our childhood and our adulthood, and really feel that commitment to kind of give back and to, I think in other conversations I've had with Jim, he's talked about the legacy piece of, leaving it in a better shape than what you found it. And I think that we really try to do that in the work as a whole. So a number of years ago, we started looking at military families. I worked in Kingston, in Ontario. I'm from Newfoundland, I should say, also, because we were identifying kind of where we're coming from. But working in Kingston, my experience of the military was a little bit differently, because coming from Newfoundland, there's a lot of kind of forged in the history of the world wars, and the history of Newfoundland is quite connected to war. So, you feel that connection. You come to Ontario, and it gets enacted a bit differently. So in a military town in Kingston, working in child psychiatry as an occupational therapist, I saw a lot of military kids. I didn't really have appreciation and understanding of what was going on for those kids, how to help those kids, what services and supports were available for those kids. So it kind of, a seed got planted for me. When I went back and I did my research training, got my PhD, got a faculty position at Queen's University and the Canadian Institute for Military Veteran Health Research, the founder, Dr. Alice Aiken, was standing this up in my department. She's like, you do mental health, you do families. How about military families? And that is kind of where it started. Then I met Dr. Norris, and we pooled our efforts together across disciplines and provinces to really try to better understand this. She had been working in this space for a while and has done some really incredibly formative work. So together we came, and as we're working on these projects and trying to better understand military families, I thought, well, what about families like mine? What about public safety families? A lot of the same stuff is going on. Is it the same? Is it different? And we started to ask those questions. So in the Ombudsman report in 2013, they talked about military families experience this kind of three-way trifecta of challenges. So one is like a high rate of relocation. They move around a lot. There's also risk. And in 2013, that risk was much more present with us in terms of the impacts of Afghanistan and people returning and transitioning than it is right now. I think right now Canadians don't feel as connected to the awareness about what our armed forces actually do and that they're currently deployed. So we have that sense of risk, we have this sense of mobility, and we have this idea of around parental relocation, so parental separation. So people are apart a lot. So during COVID, we started looking at this in a more nuanced way, like, is this the same in Army? Is this the same in Air Force? They play out differently, and we started to ask, is it the same in public safety? Do we have the same things? Are they the same? Are they different? And at the end of a very long kind of process and a lot of evidence getting merged together, and out came these 4 dimensions that really shape all of the Garnet families. So yeah, risk is there. It's part of the job. But there's also this complex issue around identities, like how do we fit in the community? How do we fit within our occupational community? How do we fit in the broader civilian community? How do we manage the logistics, all the transitions in and out of the home, the non-standard work hours, the 24/7 urgent demands that ensures the safety and security of Canadians in every community? And then the subset of that logistics is the mobility, those events where people are either, moving or they have to live separately. So these 4 things. There's no word in the English language that helps us understand that. So we tried to find a concept that would help unite us as a group of researchers. And that's how we came to Garnet. So Garnets are those January birthstones, those kind of reddy color ones most commonly. And that's really where Garnets turn out to be these great symbols because they symbolize love, healing, safe return to family. So we thought that's an apt construct. So we came to this Garnet family's lifestyle dimension, and those 4 lifestyle dimensions really play out in all Garnet families. So it doesn't matter what safety service sector, service element or sector you're in, those are playing out for you in different kinds of ways and different kinds of weightings across the life course. And so it helped us clarify what we do and what we know and what we don't know about families in different sectors, in different service elements. So it's been incredibly instructive to us as researchers. Along the same line, we were working on how do we build kind of a collective structure where we actually kind of pool our efforts and make sure that we're getting the right questions asked, we're getting the right questions answered, we're putting people together, and we're building the capacity to actually do the work and to do the work well. And that's how we came to create the Garnet Families Partnership, which is funded nationally now by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada until 2031. And so it has really enabled us to look at collective impact and how to respond to the priorities within the community and to make sure that that work gets back out there quickly. And so we're very pleased to be able to welcome our trainees in this inaugural Family Science Summer Institute to really be that generation that kind of picks up this call to action to say, there's a lot of work to be done for Garnet families, and together we actually can get there. So that's a little bit about Garnet families. So I'm going to turn it back now to my colleague, Dr. Norris, to help you understand a little bit more about family science and how family science and Garnet families come together. Thank you.
So yes, it's a good question. Why family science, and why have we as family scientists, and that's my home discipline, why have we been invited to be part of this experience, supporting and sustaining the research, theories, and practice associated with Garnet families? So just a little bit of a tidbit about who I am. I am a family scientist. I've been privileged to be part of the Mount St. Vincent University community for my whole adult life, if not before that, as an undergrad student here and moving to where I am today. Family science and families are my passion, my interest, and I've been able to apply all that I'm learning. I continue to learn every day, apply my understanding of theories, research, and practice to military and veteran families, as Dr. Cram noted, for most of my career. But now, as I say, the road I'm on is widening a bit and to include public safety families. So I will tell you a little bit about family science and why we think it matters to Garnet families and why it might be a vehicle or a mechanism to support them. So it is a scientific study of families and close interpersonal relationships. It's a unique combination of characteristics that makes up our family science lens, establishing it as a very distinct social science discipline, an applied discipline, but one that's very distinct and a very apt knowledge base for professional practice as well as research. Family science focuses on relationships and interactions among family members. We use a systems perspective, which means that we consider families and family relationships within broader social systems. We don't just shine a light on what's happening inside the family, as significant as those processes are. We extend our gaze beyond to see how patterns and processes and situations, equities and inequities filter down to affect family life. We as family scientists understand what healthy relationships look like across a diversity of families. We do understand families to be diverse in form and function. And I'd like to say that we do have an in-depth and sophisticated understanding of family dynamics as they're influenced by broader social systems across the lifespan. We're also strengths-oriented, not to deny the fact that families struggle, families have challenges, hindrances that impede their passage through the life course across time. But we, while not negating the reality of those deficits and difficulties, we focus on the strengths. And our contention is, as we build the strengths, the problems might have a better chance of being understood and addressed. So we emphasize those strengths and on how families can build on those to be sustainable and self-sufficient. Of course, relying not just on the internal family realities or capacities, but also what they can take from outside the family system. Very important to family science is that it's preventative. We are what we could call an upstream approach to understanding families. We apply knowledge about healthy family functioning to help prevent problems before they occur, or if there's some percolation of family problems inside the family, we help families in supporting and building and maintaining capacities required for resiliency. There's also a critical focus to family science, which means that research and practice may also deconstruct some of the practices and policies in those systems external to the family that may disempower, exclude, or underserve a diverse range of families across the life course. And I think the critical theme within family science is particularly relevant to the work that we're doing with Garnet families. We also define family science as translational. This is another particular strength of the field. The findings of our research are meant to go out into the community, not reside entirely on a dry, dusty shelf, but to actually have relevance and meaning outside of our own academic and professional spaces. That means that we take our work and apply it in real life to help prevent problems, deal with the problems that might be starting to erupt, and also to strengthen families. The fact that we're translational also means that issues are examined in a way that transcends the traditional boundaries of each of the different disciplines. And indeed, we are an amalgam of many different disciplines that all have a particular vantage point in studying and understanding families. I like to refer to the principle of non-summativity, which simply means the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So putting together all the different disciplines into the family science space means that we have something that would not exist if we just looked at the different segments of the field independently. To call ourselves transdisciplinary means that we're holistic. It's like a cake in which the individual ingredients are no longer distinguishable and the final result is wholly different from the ingredients that made it. We're also evidence-based. Family science knowledge applied in teaching and practice and research comes from a very rigorous repository of scientific research. We use multiple methods to gather evidence and conduct our research. We have our own distinct methodologies and theories. So why do Garnet families need family science? Why do families in general need family science? Well, families have unique characteristics and relationships compared to other groups of people. Almost no other group besides a family group has the level and range of influence on a person's life over time. From big decisions as to where people live, how they deal with occupational stress and strain, to things as simple as how they squeeze the toothpaste tube. At the same time, families don't come with instruction manuals. Being part of a family doesn't necessarily mean that someone knows everything about being in a healthy, well-functioning family. Therefore, it's crucial to study and understand how families function and develop, and to apply research findings and best practices to the many situations, including those faced by Garnet families, that affect their daily lives, which is what we family science scholars and professionals endeavor to do. Through summarizing and sharing our research findings, offering programs for families and family members, and much more, family science provides evidence-based ways for families to strengthen interpersonal relationships and overall well-being. So, now we will turn our attention back to the panelists who have graciously agreed to join us this evening. And I'm going to begin with a series of questions for our panelists, and I will let you know at the outset to whom I am directing the questions, so there's no confusion. And if you need clarification or would like me to repeat the question, I can do that as well. So I know this is a phrase, a slogan that applied directly to military families, but I think it might transfer to the Garnet family scenario as well. That includes the sectors that each of you represent. And this was a particular slogan that talked about the families being the strength behind the uniform. So you could think about the police uniform, the firefighter uniform, or the paramedic uniform. Beginning with you, Sarah, how do you react to that phrase? How does that sit with you?
It's interesting. I think at the beginning of the career of being a spouse of my husband, who's a police officer, there is a bit of that feeling of that I'm supporting him and I'm excited for him. And as time went on, he's been on the job 16 years and I've been a civilian member for 17, and alongside him, it's come to realize how that's somewhat problematic, in my opinion, being the one behind the first responder or the police officer or military. It's giving that idea that that I'm the support system, the only support system for him. And in that comes with a lot of heaviness and worry. And I mentioned before the idea that in our world, we have a lot of you're the first responder to your first responder. And that has also given that same kind of connotation that there is a bigger role that you're supposed to be playing for your family member that may not actually be one that you're willing to, or can take on, and you have your own struggles as well. So for me, that's kind of what comes to mind when you say that. Yeah.
It kind of makes a hierarchy of who matters in a defense or public service family as well, doesn't it? If you're behind, it says something about the integral role that families hold within the work that you do and in supporting you in the work that you do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Jim or Hillary, would you add anything to that, to Sarah's reaction to that slogan?
Yeah, when you're going through a career, and I was 21 years old when I got hired, so I was a young kid, right out of fire school, no family with regards to, no wife, no kids. And even when that started, that part of my life began, I didn't give much thought because you were so caught up in the day-to-day. It was, then once the kids came along, then it was events and it was birthday parties, and it never really crossed over, I guess, not really being aware that it was crossing over. But I really didn't find it crossing over and never paid much attention to it early on until, unfortunately, an event happened that changed everything. And that event in 2018 was a cancer diagnosis for me. And then you kind of prioritize, and it's unfortunate that it took an event like that to kind of put family at the forefront, but that's exactly what happened. And, realizing and not taking that family life for granted, not missing, the hockey games or the baseball games or the soccer games, or ensuring that myself and my wife have time to, even just to go to dinner for 2 hours to get away. We're now getting our life back a little bit more as the kids get older. But when I was first diagnosed, my son Ryan was 9 and my son Gavin was 6. So that's all they've known. However, I've made it a major priority in our family to make sure that, I don't miss those things anymore that I always thought were going to be there. And then when you get, told that you do have cancer, it certainly changed my mindset and thought process on what I need to put front and center.
So not behind, but beside, which is how we're conceptualizing it in Garnet Families Work as
Right.
well. Yeah. And one more question on the same theme, and maybe I'll direct this to you, Hillary. Another value that we hold dear in the Garnet Families world is the fact that families matter. Families matter unequivocally in their own right. How do you respond to that?
I think that they're probably the most important, part of being a first responder is knowing that they're there whenever you come home from shift. I do agree with Jim that I also started my career very young at the age of 19, and it didn't take too long for me to realize that, this career is not everything. I need to, also put some focus on who am I without the uniform. It took me a bit to learn that, maybe about 7 years, I would say, when my dad was sick and he passed away, so I was off work for a little bit. And it took me that length of time that I was off work, and then when I returned, I realized how burnt out I actually was. I had some compassion fatigue and things like that, and it really has put things into perspective that family is the most important thing, because without them I would not be able to put that uniform on every day.
So therefore, families need support and sustenance in their own right in order to be
Absolutely.
able to not just support you, as important as that is, but to also be responding well to their own needs.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you. That's our first bundle of questions. I'm now going to move it over to Dr. Krebs to ask some other questions.
Okay, so, I think this is on? Can you hear me okay? Yes, okay. Okay, so we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the Garnet family lifestyle dimensions themselves. And so when we think about logistics, which is what we've kind of come to understand, that juggle that people have to do in managing the demands of these 24/7 jobs with really very different kind of schedules, really. We need people to do these jobs. We ask people to do these jobs. We really look to people to go into the burning building, to go in and fight the criminal when everyone else is like looking for safety, and look to individuals in these jobs to really bring that kind of calm and response to what can often be chaos and the worst thing that's happening to people. So at home, you're trying to manage the reality that someone got called in to work or got pulled away, or how do you have a date night? All of the things that then become a little bit more difficult, really. There's extra challenge that goes along with those things when you think about that with the logistics. So Sarah, I'll start then with you in terms of when you think about that pileup of stressors that comes with all the risks and requirements of that Garnet job at home. How do you manage that, and how do you support the people you work with to manage that pileup?
Yeah, I think there is that's a really good question, because I think for a long time what I found has happened, and when I speak to other first responder police spouses, is you are in pretty much a survival mode for the first few years. You're trying to figure it out, and often the logistics come depending on the role your, in my case, police spouse is in, and you are trying to navigate out different times of hours, kids' bedtimes, my own work as well, and all of those things. So I think for myself, when I'm trying to manage that in the past, it has been more of every day is as it comes sort of situation, where we really don't know always what's going to happen. For example, you mentioned being called in, or during COVID, there was the convoy as well, so in Ottawa. And so there's so many different stressors that come, and unexpected logistical nightmares, I hate to say it, but it's truth, that come with the position, that as a spouse, you really are in often the time of survival. So managing that as time went on, you begin to realize you can't live in survival mode constantly. It doesn't work, and it starts to become more of a problem as time goes on. And I think you learn how to have those flexible conversations about when are we going to find time for certain things. One of the things I found most difficult is you were mentioning losing yourself, sort of losing yourself to the job, and having the logistics be part of that, losing time for myself, losing moments for the kids, and when he's home, we don't have a whole family dynamic all the time. It's almost like we became the three of us a lot. So that was very difficult. And you also mentioned when I'm supporting members and their families, it is similar to that as well. And that beginning part where you are learning, I often now try to tell family members when they're starting, because I do recruit dinner, I speak with families at recruit dinners. I try to talk about the positives as well, like Costco on a Wednesday is kind of nice, right? When you can tell your spouse, can you go shopping? You're off on Wednesday. But the reality is that you have to be flexible on both sides. The spouse as well, the police spouse in my case, has to be flexible as well and make those allowances. So I think giving yourself permission to have those conversations early on in the career is probably one of the most important things I found myself.
Well, and I think that one of the things that strikes me about your answer is how those logistical demands actually do change over the family life course. So just when you think you got it figured out, well, things kind of shift, and there's a different kind of cadence and rhythm in these families that it's helpful to really think about upstream, to give people a way to understand how to kind of get their heads around, like, what's it like to be on the job? Depending upon how much social network and support you have different options on some of those flexibility. So the flexibility and that ability to adapt, it's a constant ask of Garnet families. So really being able to do that. As I reflect on things with our life course, having been kind of in a long time spouse with a career firefighter, having kids, and there's benefits to that non-standard work and daycare and, daddy days, and really being there and present with the kids. And then, as they become older kids and they have different needs and they have different requirements and all the activities and all the schedule and all the transportation. And then as they become younger adults, like what that looks like with them leaving home. And then the logistics of managing things like occasions when people live in different places and the flexibility that we might have had of like, okay, well, dad's, like working, so we'll do your birthday on, Sunday, maybe isn't an option in the same kind of way because the kids aren't around as much. And so, like, really being able to appreciate the way in which these things continue to shape our lives, I think is really important. So you raise a lot of really important points. I'm wondering, as well, I know when we think about that kind of broadening the idea of who's in your family, a lot of what we're talking about is like within your home, like your household management logistics. But our families often extend into our friends and chosen family and extended family out into the community. And I'm wondering, Jim or Hillary, if you have a thought about kind of how you've been able to explain the missed celebrations and occasions and all those kinds of things on the logistics front.
Well, first I'd like to say that I'm sure Costco's very nice on a Wednesday. But my wife will not allow me to attend Costco as I don't get what's on the list on a regular basis. Come home with everything but. It's funny when you talk about our shift work. I do the 24-hour on, 72-hour off rotation, which means that my work schedule every week changes. I work on Monday, Friday this week. Next week I work Tuesday, Saturday, then Wednesday, Sunday. And so it changes. And funny enough, near about every event possible that's planned, whether it's, a friend event or whether it's the kids, big game, Dad's working. I only work 2 days a week. and it seems that I'm on duty for everything. I'm at a point in my career where I was, Christmas holidays, I'd always get Christmas holidays because I was a senior firefighter. Now I just got recently promoted. Now I got to start over. So now I'm junior lieutenant, getting the absolute worst holiday and have to work Christmas this year. So it is a balance, and it comes with its, getting used to it, getting that, I guess that plan down. However, not everything goes as planned. And my wife will tell you, and openly so, that she loves when I go to work. She don't have to listen to the snoring. She gets to bed to herself, and you become used to that stuff over a 20-plus year career. But the logistics of the day-to-day operations, I always say she's a rock star. I don't tell her enough, obviously, but she was what makes the family work. She's the coordinator, if you will, of the family, because she makes it work. And it may be logistically trying to get a ride somewhere for one kid because she has to be on the opposite side of town. I always make a joke that in the evenings when she gets home, she's a teacher, that we high-five each other in the driveway. We still go our separate ways. So I can only imagine what it's like when I'm not there, like the last 3 days and last week 2 days with the union work as well. A lot of travel is involved, and she gets that it's for the betterment. Again, keeping that mission alive of leaving this profession better than we found it, and building. She gets that part, but I'm sure it gets old pretty quick when you're gone long periods of times. I used to go on events that were 7 and 8 days long, and now I try and reduce everything to 3 days at the most, just to make it work. Yeah.
And a lot of transitions in and out of the home. And I think in a lot of ways, Garnet families end up doing more of a serial parenting. Like, I've got the kids, you've got the kids, and how much time is there actually together? And that, of course, is in families where there are kids. Not all families have kids. So I'm wondering, Hillary, as well, if you've had any experience even in the kind of, elder care, extended friends and family, into the community with your friends that you can speak to on these logistics.
Yeah, I think the most important part would be just communication. having my in-laws, my husband's actually from this area, and we live on, Prince Edward Island, so we do travel quite a bit. And throughout the past, I think, 8 years that we've been together, they still don't really understand my schedule because I'm the only one who does shift work. So just communicating, like, I can't make this Christmas, but maybe next. You can FaceTime me maybe on shift kind of thing. And just, communicating that I won't be present at every event, but I will try my hardest to, make the ones that I can and make them count. Another thing I find very helpful, I am the coordinator in my marriage, so I have, my own planner. My husband got me a big calendar that I have on our wall. He seems to forget that it's there most times, but it is there. And so also just letting your friends and family know, like, at the front of the week, I basically set my schedule just so they're aware of, like, where I am and I won't be home for dinner, things like that. Just communication for sure.
Great, thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Very interesting responses to those logistics questions. My hat goes off to you for the spinning plates that you have to keep in the air all the time. So I'm shifting the focus to risk. And so, Jim, I'm going to begin with you. I don't need to tell any one of you, but what I have learned by virtue of being part of Garnet families over the last couple of years is that the nature of the work demanded in defense and public safety involves really serious risks to personal safety. These risks, of course, include exposure to traumatic events, which can result in emotional fatigue, mental health challenges, and exposure to carcinogens, leading to occupational cancers. When facing the realities of these risks, how might a family come together and stay together? Do you want to begin there, Jim?
I certainly can. It's a great question, as you know, my background, kind of dealing with the exposures more on the carcinogenic side than the PTSD side and having that own personal experience. And again, I want to reiterate that, up until that point, and I was one of the guys, I was hired at 2001, I did things wrong going through my career. Now, I knowingly know that I did those things wrong. I never showered after fires. I never cleaned my gear. Got back in the truck, contaminated. All that stuff that, certainly never helped my cause with a cancer diagnosis. However, it took that change to kind of, and we started a little bit before that. We probably started to change, shift the mindset of, cleaning up after cause, within the last 10 years for sure. However, when I got that diagnosis, that was when it really put the family at the forefront. And it really made me think, and I'm very conscious over, not just myself, but my crew as well. Even before I became an officer, I got it, and I experienced it, and I saw what it done to my family as well, and I don't want that happening to my crew, to my members, to anyone, because it sucks. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. It is terrible. There's days that, you put on your good face, and as good as this gets, and you just put one foot in front of the other. But when you do have that family support, when an event like that happens, that is massive. And it doesn't need to be, wife and kids. It's parents, if you still have them, if you're lucky enough. Mine have both passed on, but I got great friends, I got great coworkers. I have full support from my employer with the City of St. John's. No questions asked. You just do what you have to do, and we want you back to work healthy. And having those support services, not just on the family front, but right through, certainly made things easier to ensure that I got back a healthy person when I got back on the trucks. And there was no talk of me going to a day job. I wouldn't be able to work Monday to Friday. I'm not a Monday to Friday guy. I'm a shift work. And I wanted to make sure that I was healthy to be ready to go back on the trucks. And having that support system was massive in that. I was just a guy healing from the wounds. They were the ones that were making sure that I was okay.
So two things I'm taking away from that response, and thank you very much, is that extending the family, quote unquote, beyond your wife and children to include other people, including coworkers and other people with some, if you will, authority over you, not only help you, but help your family. Would that be fair to say?
That's exactly it. It's a much bigger network. And, you know, through this job and through being involved with the International Association of Firefighters, I've got to meet people from all over Canada and the United States. So when this happened, you know, I had people reaching out to me from all over. And even just those conversations are a huge help. And then you never know what you're going to be involved in. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to get involved with organizations like Garnet Families, you know, Wellspring Canada. So with it came a lot of bonuses as well to be able to do better going forward and ensure that we have healthy members going forward. But that huge support network was the key for, you know, me getting back to work.
Well, thank you. Perhaps I could shift to Sarah now and say, when facing these realities, how might these realities affect family members and family functioning overall?
Yeah, I think when thinking about the risk realities and from the perspective as a family member, I have often thought of the risk on the road. Of course, policing, you're worried about a plethora of things that can go wrong. But it also extends to their mental state and the risk that the trauma that the member sees. And for myself, that was a bit of a later concern of mine. I think I was very much worried about my spouse getting hurt on the job and all the things that could happen. But later, as time went on, it became more clear to me that the risks were more to do with mental health, including my own. And sort of going back to what you were talking about with Garnet Families is about the fact that the family members have their own need for supports, mental health supports, being part of that family, that first responder family. And so the risk kind of shifted, while there's still, of course, there is always that worry of safety on the road. It definitely shifted more for myself, more into that mental health idea of what could maybe happen to our marriage or to the kids, how they're going to handle Dad being a police officer and how he's sometimes walking on eggshells because they've had a bad call or there's something. So it really did go from that worry about on the roads, on the job, to extending beyond that into more of a mental health, extended family, myself included, my own need to have somewhere to put some of these worries and not feeling like I had the place to do that. And then in my role as a wellness resource liaison, working with membership, that definitely is the same thing I'm hearing as well when I'm supporting families and members, that the mental health of the membership and then extending into the families. And the organization also being part of like either the solution and sometimes not, also being a factor as well. So that's a lot of where those risk factors come up for me, and I've seen it quite often with others as well.
Thank you. So one last question about risks, and I'm going to direct this one to Hillary. So what does this mean for families, these risks, these real risks that you incur through your service? How do you manage those outcomes or impacts?
I think we all need to be very cautious as first responders in what we do bring home. We want to be careful of like the secondary trauma essentially that we can give to our family members. You know, at the beginning of my career, you know, I come home, I talk to my family about, you know, the cool call that I got to do, which in their minds wasn't really that cool. It's more, you know, it's scary, it's someone's worst day, but at the beginning, you know, that we're adrenaline junkies a little bit, right? So it's cool, it's exciting. And then now later on in my career, understanding that I don't have to bring home necessarily all of the details to family. They don't need to know all of those, you know, kind of scary details. So just knowing when to kind of stop talking, but still knowing, you know, that you can share like a little bit, because you still want to connect with your partner or, you know, your parents or siblings or whoever you do have at home. Yeah, just being very, very cautious of that. And now I'm also trying to let my coworkers also, you know this information. Just like, hey, just be careful of what you do bring home, because at the end of the day, they're your most important, you know, people in your life, and they're your support system. So we just have to be cautious.
Thank you. So now back to my colleague, Dr. Cram, who's going to ask questions about identities.
Okay, so identities is one of these really interesting, complicated concepts, because who are you? Who is your family? Where do you fit? Are you in sync with the community? So some of the things that we can see with identities is, depending upon what sector you're in, there's a different kind of social capital attached to that within the community. So some folks are more and less favorable to different sectors. And so how does that kind of affect the family and how the family fits? And so, you know, certainly within our group, I talk about that feeling of isolation that comes because of the shifts when you have a community level kind of celebration. So, you know, our most recent holiday was, you know, May 24th weekend, and in Kingston there's a different 24-hour schedule. So when my husband works a Sunday, he also works the Friday before. So he works a Friday and a Sunday 24s. So he works for 24 hours, he comes home, he sleeps for a little bit, and then he has to go back to work for another 24 the very next day. So it seems some years that Friday, Sunday hits every single long weekend. It really feels like that. And also, do you think that he knows when long weekends are? Like he thinks in shifts. He thinks in his 28-day cycle. He is not aware of when, you know, May 24th actually is. It's irrelevant to him. It doesn't factor into his work schedule. And so we've seen this even like within our family, this difference in like time and calendaring. And then you put it out again to the community, and the community is like, everybody's going and doing something, and it's like, well, yes, but, you know, he's at work. And so that really does change over the life course, because in younger years when the kids were at home, it was like, it's the three of us, we're gonna go have fun. And now the kids don't even live there, right? So it's like me and the dogs. What are we doing? You know, extra long walks. So this is where, when we think about some of these identities pieces, there's so many nuances. And, I'd love for us to kind of think about some of those things, even in the labels. So Hillary, I'm gonna start with you. We certainly hear about it with military families. So that's very commonly kind of referred to, military families. We're not really sure if veteran families think of themselves as veteran families. We're not even sure if veterans think of themselves as veterans. So there's like, wow, labels, it's really complicated. But when we think of, paramedic families, would your family identify as a paramedic family or a public safety or first responder family?
I don't think so necessarily. Maybe, again, in the earlier stages of my career, they were also very excited for me. At every family dinner, it was brought up, right? Especially on PEI being quite small. You hear of everything, right? It's the ambulance was down the road at the neighbor's house. What was going on there? And even though I typically know that information, I can't share that. So even, I guess, in the last number of years, watching my sister also at these family dinners and me constantly being asked these questions by my family members, it's seeing like it actually affects her as well. So they weren't asking her questions. She was in university for a couple of years, so they're like, how's school? And then they just wanted to know about that accident that they heard or whatever, right? So I think maybe at first they would almost consider maybe themselves like my, first responder family. But now I am not as, I guess, close to that identity, really. I am actually, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a dog mom, I'm a, hopefully in the future, human mom. But, I'm other things other than a paramedic. But it just took me a really, really long time to learn that. And I still see some of my friends and coworkers who that is their, only thing right now, like in their life. They are still very consumed by the job. So I'm trying very slowly to kind of help them navigate those changes, essentially, to be like, you are your own person without it, without that uniform.
Well, and I think you raised some really interesting points about while you're serving, how big is the identity to you in your family, in your life course, in your life and your personal well-being while you're in that job, and then what does that mean for you, when you choose to or need to leave that job? So that kind of sense of identities and the kind of return to kind of the civilian life, the life after service, what that looks like if identities is so all-consuming. What does that mean for people? I'm not sure if you have any perspective on that, Hillary, from that, watching other people kind of go through that transition, and you've already talked about changing how you're framing the identity. Just wondering if you have anything to add on that.
I think it's actually a little bit scary to almost take yourself outside of just being a paramedic. I remember I'm like, what do I want to do on my days off? Because at first it was, well, I'm going to pick up overtime because, I have to be there because they're short paramedics and they always are and always probably will be. There's always, work to be done. Someone should always be working, and you just kind of think that maybe like that should be you, but you need to kind of realize you can't be at every single emergency call. You're not going to save everybody. You need to take care of yourself. So I'm very much into fitness, so I kind of lost myself in the job for the first couple of years. And I was like, I need to get back into this. So I, signed up for a random class, and then I was like, oh, this is what I was missing. And then I kind of just slowly, I think, integrated other things, other hobbies into my life, and also reconnecting actually with friends that I even went to like high school with, who work the Monday to Friday, jobs. So it's just kind of nice to then, I guess, see myself doing other things and not just being at work and just being a paramedic. So finding hobbies and putting yourself out there in other friend groups and things like that.
It's kind of balancing out that social support, that circle of support, and where you belong, where you fit, where you find purpose and meaning, all of those things. Okay, Sarah, how about you? Would you say that you're a police family? Is it true for you?
I would say that, I feel like the police family thing has been like very popular, the blue family, that kind of idea. And I think there's a lot of pride in that. But as you were mentioning, it's also outside of, the blue family, the community itself sometimes doesn't love the police. So you inadvertently, your identity almost becomes that you silo yourself from the broader community because you feel like there's no trust between ourselves and the community as a whole, extended. Even when we're talking about family, it can be a contentious subject, policing around the dinner table. So they want to hear it, and then they also have a lot of opinions. So you're kind of becoming, this identity is so for myself, yeah, I do consider myself a police family, but I think kind of going back to what you were saying, there is also, you can be lost in that and start isolating yourself from bigger things and other people and hobbies, because you almost become very, like camaraderie is almost the problem. The feeling of family becomes more of actually problematic, that you don't extend yourself beyond that blue family, trusting others, that sort of thing. So I found myself become much more aware of that, similar to what you were saying, and pushing myself, and even having those conversations that sometimes maybe it is that somebody doesn't agree with all the things that are happening, and still allowing those conversations to happen and not retreating, which is what has become a lot of what people are doing. And also talking about that identity piece too, and I've spoken about this a few times with my colleagues as well as first responder family friends, that as the spouse, the family member, you also again lose yourself in that identity, and you kind of become a bit resentful towards your first responder spouse, as though who am I again, right? And because of that, you have to go searching again, that it's not all about the first responder that's doing all the things that I'm kind of dancing around. So identity becomes back to, as the kids get older, as you said, things shift. I go, okay, what about me, my turn, and some things that I want to do, and I'm more than just that blue family or that police spouse. So yeah, that's probably, I still feel like a proud police family, but it isn't probably the first thing I think of when I think of my own identity or my spouse's. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Jim, how about you? Fire family?
I don't consider us like a, fire family as such. I think Hillary summed up my career in a nutshell. Exactly the same. I was 21 years old when I started. I was a kid. Man, I had a cool job. I get to run around in a red fire truck with lights and siren, and man, this is going to be a cool career. Then as time goes on, I was the same way as Hillary. Overtime, as much as you can handle, shift after shift, kind of thinking that they need me. No, they don't. However, on the family side, and it got better over time, I realized that, yeah, I got it. I'm more than just being at the fire department. I'm more than just being a fireman and a paramedic. And over time, it was kind of, where do you work? I work with the city of St. John's. And then they dig a little bit more. Well, what department are you in? It's like, yeah, all right, I'm with the fire department. I'm proud of fireman. I love my job. It's just, you're right. I can see sometimes, like, my wife's a teacher. Now I got 2 boys. Whose job do you think they want to talk about more? It's certainly Dad's. They're wanting information. My oldest says he wouldn't mind being a fireman. And, I mean, she's a teacher. I mean, she's only molding our future. So I think she's certainly worthy of some credit, but I think it's just the nature of first response in general, is the excitement that people, if you're not on the inside, it's exciting to you, and it's, you got a lot of questions. You want to know what we do and understand what we do. And I think that was kind of, and Hillary, you've summed it up perfectly, but it's the same kind of idea for me that, as I got older, it kind of, the novelty wore off, if you will, of what I do for a living.
So I've heard a few things that I want to actually put together and see what your perspective is, because the sense of, people identifying and thinking of you in a certain kind of way because you belong to a certain kind of sector. And, sharing what you do, maybe you're at a, friend's house and you meet somebody for the first time, or you're at some sort of family dinner and then they do that, oh, you went to that call. There's that fascination that people have and they want to know the details. And one of the things that we've really seen with the identities is that as social media really kind of, there's more presence of, there's more artifacts of kind of what happened, there's more awareness. How do you navigate this identities of like, I have responsibility around that information, the privacy, the experience, and people are just randomly asking you socially like, hey, what happened there? Like, did you go to that call? And it's a whole new wave with the presence of social media and also for families having like almost immediate access. Like I will be in a work call and someone will be like, I hear sirens, and I'll look up on on the Twitter, what used to be the Twitter, where the Kingstonist, and I'm like, oh, look at that, like wild flame thing, and then I'm like, I wonder what if my husband's at that call, and that was not previously possible. So there's a level of awareness within the community that can kind of create a level of interest. And how do you negotiate some of those complex identities? Who wants to take that one? Oh, Jim, your microphone's still on.
Oh, there you go, wouldn't imagine. It's funny because I've been in those situations a lot of times. You go to every year my son's hockey teams change, so we have gatherings, and you're introduced to certain people, and there's always one or two people that are on your team that you know, and you go to these events, and it's, hey, this is Jim. He's a fireman. Why? And then it starts, that exact question. I seen the fire truck out in Conception Bay South where I live today, but I don't work in Conception Bay South, but for some reason, a lot of people think when a fire happens in Newfoundland, Labrador, I know about it, or I was there, which is not true. But it happens a lot. Or I seen on Twitter or Facebook, or you're right, social media plays a huge, huge role now in the awareness, I guess, of and promoting, if you will, what we do. And it's not always a positive thing when that information gets out. Being a wife of a firefighter, like you said, the worry, you get heightened by seeing an event. He's on shift. It's in his district. And then that elevates, but you have no idea what's going on. He may not even be in that fire. He could be a pump operator, or he could be chief commander, or whatever the case may be.
Well, and it turns out you can't really call him because he's actually like, in a fire. So you actually can't call to find out. So you just have to like sit on it.
You gotta
You're
wait.
like, oh,
Yeah,
I guess,
or social media.
or social media.
And then
updates.
you're not getting the entire picture, and now you're making assumptions of what you're going through.
Yeah.
And again, it heightens the worry. Yeah.
Yeah, and Sarah, you had mentioned in terms of, police families, not everybody always likes the police, so, images on social media or the news, like, how do you deal with that as a family?
I won't say, no, just kidding. As a family, I have to shut off social media because I have had very difficult times where people have gone off on certain calls and or what they've read or assumptions. The media is the message, let's be honest. And when you feel like your hands are tied, as also a member, I work with in the police service, so I don't really comment on anything. You just almost feel like you have no voice for that. Very much, this was what brought to mind when you were talking is during the convoy. I couldn't escape it. We'd go for breakfast, and there's the convoy on, the news channel, and then people are using social media to make, opinions on things and taking pictures of police officers and posting it. Very dangerous situations as well. And during that time, that is when I was working, assisting with the Ottawa First Responder Foundation, we did a support group for that reason. It was partly that reason. Also, COVID, we couldn't get together, so we did it online. But it was very clear that the police spouses were really struggling with not having the ability to speak up and say what they felt, and if they did, it would just be keyboard warriors. So as a family, it was sort of like we have to shut it down and protect ourselves from those things. So I very much have this love-hate with social media, because some of the time it's great to get information out, you know, Garnet Families is on there, but there is often times where I can't even look at things because it's just so upsetting, and often wrong. And so for myself, it's been a bit of a struggle for that social media. But I will also say, it's also very frustrating when you go out for dinner with friends, and that's all they talk about. And you just want to move on and talk about something else. And you're trying to have these relationships outside of in my case, the blue family. And I want to create more connection pieces on other things. And even within my marriage, we would sit around the dinner table, and we'd have to be very cognizant of the fact that we're not talking shop talk, you know? We're going to be aware that this is something we may touch on and have a boundary around a little bit, and then move on, because we just don't want to keep hashing it out and having the same conversations, and actually have something beyond that. Yeah.
Hillary, how about you? How does that land for you?
I would have to agree with Sarah just about talking, I guess, at the dinner table or any events. Just, you know, you can kind of mention it, just not about the details. Same thing with social media. It's, you know, half true, I would say. They always forget about, you know, the most important details, which I find very frustrating. So I typically don't honestly comment too much in regards to that. Sometimes I do fib and say, like, I wasn't there, I have no idea. And I leave it at that, and then I change the subject. Especially if I look over and I see my sister or whoever else is there, and they're basically rolling their eyes because it's the 10th time, even just during that hour, that it's been brought up.
And I think when those things can happen, it introduces like a separateness of, like, you know, the work is different and it carries different responsibilities, and then how that works then in, you know, family systems and in community systems. There's things that can just play out fairly quickly as, oh, it's different, like I maybe don't want to have this conversation. So I think that's one of the things that when we think about Garnet Families and helping the broader community understand that these things will take some time to grow the awareness of how it plays out on the other side. Like, it might be interesting to have all the details, and people often like the gory details, but that comes at a cost, really, to the family and to the personnel who are then expected to kind of produce that information. So I think that's something that we've been noticing as well, just kind of, and certainly our military families are not immune to this, and having information about what goes on overseas, and not having enough access to the information in real time, but having that awareness. So Deb, would you like to ask anything else before we move into the last one?
This may not resonate as much with public safety families, but as a military and veteran family researcher, certainly as Heidi has just mentioned, there is that filtering of what's going on in the geopolitical context that has to be managed at home, particularly with young children. What's also significant for those families is mobility, and it affects children's education, the employment for the non-military spouse, with licensure and certification varying province by province across the country. And then I've heard a lot of you talk about, all three of you actually talk about the priority you've placed on sustaining relationships outside the Blue family, outside the fire family, and the paramedic family. So while this may not directly relate to your experience, do you have any insight on how mobility is managed in Garnet families?
So can I just frame as well, like, so that could be having to move, having to work separate from your family, or being unable to move because the job is like here in, this municipality or this jurisdiction, and you've got to start over somewhere else. And what about your spouse's career? Like, how that plays out.
For us, it's, on the fire side, I don't have to tell you how difficult it can be to move from municipality to municipality. We get a lot of people come in out of industry, worked around Newfoundland, Labrador on different industrial sites, and then they come into the municipal side, and that's where they plant down for the career. We were no different. If my wife had her way, we would be about 8 hours over on the west coast, over by Corner Brook, over that area. But I can't just pick up and move. She can move around a little bit. She has a bit of freedom as a teacher to work around the province, based on, her seniority and her collective agreement stuff, but it's much easier for her to maneuver around than it is for me. Over on the West Coast, there's one fire department and there's 28 people that work there. I'm in a municipality, we have 200 plus members. So it's harder to move on the fire side. So I told her that when we got together, and I said, "You're stuck with me, honey. This is the way it got to be." And she knew what she was getting.
She knew what she was getting in for.
She did.
Did you say that out loud? So, who knows? I think it's one of the phrases is like, who really knows what they're getting in, signing up for, because what you think you're signing up for really changes as you're in it, as your family changes, as the career changes, all of those things. But Jim, you do raise that these are jurisdictional differences. So in fire, it's a municipal job, almost exclusively. And so you can't have a lateral move in fire for whatever reason. It's all collective agreement based. It's not the same in police, and it's not the same in paramedic, and it's not the same in a lot of the other public safety sectors. But one of the things on the mobility with fire that we're seeing in an interesting evolution of cost of living stuff and how long it takes for people to, say, work in Vancouver. Like, people who work in Vancouver don't live in Vancouver, right? They're commuting in. And so British Columbia has recently moved into a 24-hour schedule, and because people are commuting for 2 hours in each direction. We're even seeing it in Kingston. So by the time people get on somewhere, maybe their family is like, well, I'm not moving, right? Sometimes we see that in, certain ages and stages in the military where they go into what they call IR, which is imposed restriction. I don't actually know why it's called that, but
I have no idea.
it's called we're going IR. And so, the family stays put and the person goes to their new posting. So you see these different kind of iterations evolving as we see that mobility. And we certainly see in RCMP gets posted around, OPP often, there's places, especially when you are moving into Indigenous communities or you're working up north. Generally speaking, sometimes it's fly in, fly out. And you're gone for 2 weeks and you're back for 2 weeks and all kinds of different shift iterations.
And I think a big portion of it too, to think about, and I know a lot of you in the room are younger people and probably not thinking about pensions. And I know in Ontario you can move around as a firefighter and take your pension with you. You can't with me. I'm in my pension plan, so it's not like I can just hop out of one and get into another one. So there's difficulties that comes with that kind of keeps you there. And that was the point of, the retention part, of having that as part of your benefits and having a good pension and not, moving around from municipality to municipality. So we're seeing a lot of it in Ontario from, firefighters even going to chief's positions that can take their pension and they can move around and bop around a fair bit.
Okay, so Hillary, how does mobility look in the paramedic sector?
There's not a ton of moving around per se. Right now in Prince Edward Island, we only have one ground ambulance service. So whenever I got hired, at the age of 19, essentially by the age of 20, I was in a full-time permanent position signing up for a pension while the rest of my friends were in maybe year 1 or 2 of university. So I had no idea what I was doing. They were worrying about what they were going to wear to their dorm party, and I was like, I'm signing up for a pension, which was really weird. But in my marriage, I'm the one who has, this job that comes with seniority. So everything is seniority based. We have now a couple different roles within our organization that I can kind of move around, but I have to have seniority in order to still, be awarded that job. So whenever I changed from being on the, ground ambulance, I accepted a position part-time on this mobile mental health crisis unit. But I was awarded that, not because I deserved it, which I think I did, but because I had the seniority to do so. And now that I've been there 12 years, I'm getting closer to the top of the seniority list. I'm about at least halfway, if not a little bit more than that, which is kind of scary in its own. Not many people make it to retirement. It's a very low percentage for paramedics anyways. So if we were to move, my husband is from this province. So we have had many conversations of what our future looks like and if we were to ever move. And I just said, as long as we, communicate and make this plan, because it's me who has to uproot and leave behind my seniority and everything like that. I would have to start from, zero if I was to move. And also every province is different. So some provinces you have to write, their own provincial exams and their own hiring scenarios and all these things that you would have to go through as well. So I think did the best that I could, and I kept my seniority, and I'm now part-time in this mobile mental health unit, and I still work the ambulance, kind of the other half, as well as a desk job, and I kind of help dispatch actually our community paramedics. So that's kind of new and different as well. And then I also then worked up north. So I was kind of 2 weeks on, and then I got to pick when I got, or whenever I took another contract to go back. So I wasn't leaving my seniority to only then maybe try the up north thing. I was able to keep that. I was very lucky to do that. So I kind of wanted to put my hands maybe in a couple different pots just to see what it was like, and was able to keep my seniority. But if we were to ever, maybe move around in the future, it would have to be definitely a conversation. My husband is a mechanic, so it's a little bit easier per se for him to kind of uproot, and he can work on his own in the driveway if we had to. Maybe not in the winter, but so it's a bit easier. I do sit on the board of directors for our paramedic association back home, and that's actually part of what we do is we try to advocate for the profession, and we're now self-regulated in the province, which is pretty new, so we're excited about that. We're only like a year in, which means that other organizations like the hospitals, they can actually now technically hire their own paramedics instead of going through our one employer and then have it as a contract. So essentially, if they wanted to hire a paramedic at a dentist office or to work the offload delays at the hospitals where we have to wait for hours with our patients sometimes before they get a room, the hospitals could hire their own paramedics for that, that back hallway where we wait. They haven't yet. I think probably some things are in the works, and it will probably take a while. So we're hoping that in the future there'll be more opportunities as such, so you don't have to maybe think about just being stuck in one place and having, I guess that pressure that if I was to try something new, then I have to start all over again.
Yeah, and being able to find that pathway of, where you fit, and before COVID, when I think, at least in Ontario, it was harder for paramedics to get full-time gigs.
You can walk right out of school now into a full-time gig if anyone is interested in
amazing.
going to school.
Yeah.
You can walk right into a full-time job now, which was definitely not the case when I started.
And so we would hear people, having 5-6 uniforms in the trunk of their car, depending upon where they were working that next shift, with no real certainty. and really working across the different counties in their region and having to really just figure it out on the fly. So that combination of logistics and mobility was really, really big. But things have changed in the world, and the number of paramedics has changed as well.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, sorry, that was a loaded question for me. Had a lot to say.
Yeah, thank you. How about you, Sarah? Any thoughts on that?
So when you were talking about it, I was thinking, well, no, there's really not that movement. But what I noticed myself, my inner thoughts were a lot of the time, not quite the same as mobility, but when in my family situation, when there are courses, there's so many courses as you move in seniority and policing. Oh, I would like to do the undercover course. I would like to do this. I'd like to do that. And these courses are sometimes overnight, 2 weeks, like continuous. You don't see them. And all these other things, as well as court. So it's not the mobility, it's almost like you feel actually very stuck and unable to do your own thing. So as a family member, you're at their, whatever they're deciding to do, if they want to pursue some career or something else, you have the extra things on top of their actual position while they're pursuing a new career. So you almost feel like there's no movement at all for yourself. So it's not quite the same as being able to move. There's not really an option for that as well. I mean, there could be some movement for that, but it's more, when I was listening, I was thinking it's a lot of the actual position itself being, as you're moving it up, the other things come with that, the career, the court time, the constantly off doing other things where you actually don't feel like you can do anything different. And sort of similarly what you were saying about your spouse, like if they wanted to leave, they could, but it would be a whole thing, right? And so for the same idea, what I was thinking is I would love to have, I'd like to do some courses. I'd like to do 2 weeks at, whatever. And often it is that stuff where they're off doing these things and then coming back. So it's not quite the same as the mobility idea, but that was what went through my head.
Yeah, and I think that when we really developed the Garnet family lifestyle dimensions, identified them through the work, is like the logistics is this kind of steady belt of just ongoing, dynamic, like how do you manage all of the juggle? And then the mobility is like these punctuated moments of, for military families in particular, or RCMP, like where you're posted, like you're up and moving, and like deal with the consequences, figure this stuff out, the career disruption, the children's education, the access to healthcare, all of that stuff. But there are these other moments that, depending upon where you are in the career life cycle and the jurisdiction that you're in, like there's periods of time that you're just like apart. And then the logistics really ramps up. So they're very connected. So, you raise the life course of the family and that career life course, there's changing demands on the families as we go through. And they really do kind of cascade into all the dimensions, because anything that we've talked about, and it, relates here to identities and mobility and logistics and risk, and somehow they're all in the pot together. Sometimes one is louder and heavier than the others. So some of the work that we've done within kind of Garnet families is really try as researchers within the Families Matter research group to really pull together understanding health and well-being for families of military, veteran, and public safety personnel, first responders, and really to understand what those experiences are, what those needs are, and what those who study, serve, and support them really need to understand. So the research end. We also have, funded by Medivy, the Garnet Families Network, which really does a lot of this outreach. So some of the things, like Hillary, when you met up with Garnet families, it's like learning about the resources and supports that are available, and we've really tried to create kind of a one-stop shop for folks to come to Garnet Families, the website, and to be able to see, like, where do I go to understand how to do this as a lifestyle? How do I get ahead of that? And how do I find out about things like PSP Net Families, which is really meant to be that kind of well-being hub for what it means to be on the job, and how to have these conversations that we are, how many conversations have you identified through the panel of things that you've had to deal with within your families and have like really explicit conversations about how are we going to deal with this thing? And so PSPNet Families offers that, and the online internet-based cognitive behavioral therapy as well. That's tailored to the lifestyle, so it resonates. So like we get it. We're here for you. We get it, and we're bringing that kind of scholarly research, that evidence to you, and trying to make it easy. So we've been working on that for the past number of years, and really. We're happy to be able to have these kinds of conversations. And we want to take a few minutes now to kind of open this up to questions from the audience, to see from our trainee group or some of the members of the public who are joining, are there things that you want to ask Deb or me or Sarah, Jim, also Hillary? I know there's a lot. Yes. I'll repeat your question as you say it. Okay, so let's see if I did it justice. You all seem like you've been kind of in this lifestyle, on the job, serving alongside, in the Garnet roles for, at least 10 years. Are there things that you've learned that looking back now, lessons learned, advice to give to those starting out? Is that fair? That's fair. I got a thumbs up. Okay. So, all right, Sarah.
Yes, there are some things I wish I'd known or done that I do often suggest and tell our membership at OPS as well as the families. One in particular is, we kind of touched on that, is knowing when you're supporting, what your role is as that supporting family member, but when the line or what your boundary is as well for that support. So I think often I'm talking to spouses and they are like, well, I'm supporting them. That's my job as the spouse, like that's my position. But knowing where your boundary is as well, your own need for that mental health check, just sort of talking about secondary trauma. I think that conversation having at the very beginning of the career and then continuously is really important for the family members and the spouses, so that as things move on, you do those rechecks and you can say, for example, my boundary is I don't really ever want to hear about any child trauma or baby deaths. And we've talked about that, and that's why it's really important to have those conversations, because you also feel very much like you want to give them a place and space to do that, but that's where the clinicians and peer support, those sorts of things, that's where those things maybe should be. And just having those conversations at the very beginning of the career and then continuously is really important. That's something I wish I'd known, and as we went on, we learned, but it would have been great to have that knowledge at the very beginning.
Thanks, Sarah.
We have these conversations regularly, especially if you end up what we call a recruit on shift with you. We get them at the beginning, during the orientation. We get them for a day, the group, and, we talk about work-life balance. And believe it or not, it is okay to prioritize yourself. And we ensure that they hear that, and it's okay to do that. And you often hear that saying, it's okay to not be okay. Well, it's also okay to be okay, right? It's okay to prioritize yourself. It's okay to be healthy. And we have those conversations a lot, even on shift. I always call it the off-the-cuff peer support. It's not officially peer support, but you do end up, having those conversations with those young men and women that come into the job to ensure that they don't make the job the be-all, end-all. for their life and for their family's life. We have a wide range. Sometimes we have some young kids come in, and then there's other times there's a guy on my shift, 40 years old, and he just joined last year. But, you know, you still have those conversations with him to ensure that he is aware and about, you know, your situational awareness of the job and of your family life, and really work and keep that work-life balance at the forefront.
I think having conversations, especially with those new hires, about not letting the job consume your whole life, and making sure, you know, to let them know that maybe put some effort into finding some hobbies or continuing the hobbies that you already do have, and making sure you have, you know, that work-life balance, that it's okay to, you know, have whatever hobbies that you like to do outside of work, as well as, you know, finding some people within the organization or within the company that you get along with and can do some of these things outside of work with. But also very important to not only maybe see coworkers on your days off, but to also have non-coworkers who aren't first responders. Just to have that balance, I think, is super important. And also, yeah, talking to any of your family members about that work-life balance and talking about boundaries. And if there's certain things that they don't want to hear, a lot of my friends, they don't do well if I even say like the word blood, let alone talk about it. So I know like not to go there, but recognizing that maybe early on, so you just know that, you know, maybe to not bring up those certain subjects.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. Go ahead.
Hello. I think you're in. I think you're part of the Garnet family universe, absolutely. And kudos to you for coming out, because I know you had a test yesterday and an assignment tomorrow. So, yeah, exactly, exactly. So you're well organized. So obviously, those military spouse capacities have transferred into your academic work as well. So, yes.
Just can you do a little summary of what she said for those online who may not have
Oh,
heard?
okay, I'm sorry. So you are just asking about where you fit within the Garnet Families Network, if you have the eligibility, and I'm paraphrasing here. Would that be fair? Okay. And you already heard my answer. So absolutely, thumbs up, and thanks for coming out tonight.
So just for the benefit of those online, just as a military spouse, a returning post-secondary student, mother of several children, many children, house reno, deployment prep, like there's a lot going on. There's a lot happening. And so this is where, you know, you really laid out, you know, where do you fit? You were asking questions around identities. Deployment always comes with risks and requirements. Wow, you know, mobility, logistics, you know, you've got it all going on all at once. It's all making its presence. And I think that one of the things that I should mention about those lifestyle dimensions is that, you know, people in all families might experience any one of those dimensions at any point in time. So, you know, things happen, people change jobs, it's a big, you know, shift, transition, okay, people move. What happens in Garnet families is that they have all of them happening all the time. And so there's an amplification of that experience within the family system. And so when you have that amplification, you have this intensification, sometimes they're just like, they get bigger and they get heavier. And so how do we balance that and create some of those protective guardrails to make sure that families really stay well and give them what they need upstream when we can for those coming on the job, but also those who are kind of midstream or kind of further, like, towards the end of their career. So anything you want to add in? Because as a current student of Dr. Norris, family science and all, it's why we're all here.
So I'll do my job this time. Sorry. So I will paraphrase without parroting what you've said, but my heart goes out to you, not just because I know what you're dealing with in your academic life right now, but it seems as if you're juggling multiple things related to your own health and career and children in a blended family. And I guess if you can recall, one of the first questions we asked our panelists was, what do you think about the fact that families warrant their own time and attention and care through research, theory, and practice in their own right, irrespective of what role they have in supporting the member, in your case, a military member who was did you say a 7-month deployment? Yeah. In what month are you in? Or can you remember? Yeah, 2, second month. So how does that value, because I believe it is a value of the work that we do, how does that value land with you? So what I heard you say is that the MFRC and other military family resource centers here in Halifax, which I know very well, as a lot of my work is supported by them, but it serves as a guardrail. And they too would probably agree with you that there needs to be sort of an expansion of the boundaries of the work and the services that they do. So you're finding your people, it sounds like. So good for you. Thank you for coming out tonight, especially with a deadline tomorrow. It's amazing.
And I think raising some important points from a policy and program perspective when we think about families, what families are we thinking of? Research really tends to focus on a certain kind of family, usually, the male serving, the woman at home, very kind of heteronormative, like as if that's the only kind of family, and that often there's a focus on having small children. And families, and you look at all kinds of forms and functions of families, and how family needs and changes, over that life course is really important. Yes. Right. So the question is really around, as an adult children of a parent who medically released, and in that medical release process really wanted a separation of identity and community. And then what does that mean now for you as an adult child of someone who previously served? And making sense of that and how it shaped you in who you are now. Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things that you raise here is like eligibility for services and whether or not your access as a family member is contingent upon the individual seeking service. And I would say that we would argue that that is a huge issue. There's a term, it's called derivative eligibility, so that it's your eligibility is you are a derivative of, that's a policy term. And so it's very much depends on the person. So we think that excludes a lot of people, like what happens for families that break up? Does that mean you no longer have access to services? Maybe, a lot of the strain that caused the relationship to break up came from the job. And where's the responsibility around policy and program delivery, and how inclusive are these things, and how long are these windows? And I think that when we hear about these gaps as researchers, we try to respond. So Dr. Norris has actually really taken on this adult children of those who've previously served.
Yes, and it's been an overwhelming privilege to be able to include those voices within the landscape of military and veteran family research. Because there's been this erroneous assumption that because you've are no longer part of the proximal family, because you're now matured and beyond the age of majority, moved off and doing your own life, that the residual effects, the good ones and the ones that need, some attention, and it seems like you're paying attention to the things that you need to work on, that those simply just go away. But we know that those stories travel with us across the life course. And my grad students, the one row behind you, Catherine Reeves, she's been in the trenches with us in our research team here at the Mount, working on this project, generously funded by Atlas. So thank you very much, Atlas. It's been just overwhelmingly gratifying, and it's got very little to do with me as a researcher, more to do with the fact that the space is opened up for these voices to be included. One of the things that drives me as a researcher is dealing with absent voices and absent experiences that kind of get pushed away or ignored, or like people say, well, who cares? It's important to know that a lot of people do care, and we're trying to bring those stories into the arenas where something can be done, because that's the ultimate end game, not just in the work I'm doing with adult children, but with Garnet families across the board.
Thanks for your questions. So I wanted to turn attention now to the kind of summative statements. So, though, would you like to ask your question? Oh, okay, yes.
Your comment is, thank you for making the opportunity to attend this session possible. Do you have any recommendations for what people in the general public can contribute to Garnet Families and its mission?
Oh, so how could the general public contribute? We'd love to have ambassadors. So Lisa Delaney, our Director of Community Development within the Garnet Families Network, she's got a real vision for having a pan-Canadian ambassador kind of program that we'd love to be able to grow. I think that, being able to build the infrastructure and have the resources to really meet the need. We're a pretty small team to be able to do all that we do, and we're thankful to the funding that we have. But you think of how there's hundreds of thousands of Garnet families in Canada, and I think the need for attention to families around safety and security could never be greater than in this geopolitical kind of moment. So thanks for your question. So panelists, and Deborah, I'm going to ask you too, because that's a fun question. If we think about, where do we go from here? What's missing? Wouldn't it be great if, what comes to mind for what lays ahead for Garnet families? What you'd hope to be able to see? So who wants to take that one on first? Buzzer beater. Here we go. Who's doing it? Okay.
Why not? I know one frustrating part, and I've spoken to researchers from, on different subjects from all over. One of their biggest complaints is that research takes so much time. Mm-hmm. And with time, that doesn't allow them to get the resources to us in as quick as they would like. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be, and I don't know what that looks like, not being an academic researcher, by the way, full disclosure. I don't know what that looks like or how that would change from the current model. Is it a funding issue, or is it just, finding those people to be involved in your projects? And from your research, and I said this morning, thank you to all of you, because as I said this morning twice, I believe, the work you do is affecting my members, and it's bettering their lives and their families' lives. So it's important for us to be able to advocate on researching and researchers' behalf to ensure that you guys have the resources you need to be able to provide for our members. And that's no different if it's a paramedic or us or police. But I think that will be probably one of I'd like to see it more. And we still do, I'm not saying, I mean us as a profession, I guess, and I'm sure it's no different than any other, we still do a poor job of letting people, making them aware of the resources when we get them. Getting them out and ensuring that people are aware that resources exist, driving them to a website and saying, it's right here. I'm guilty of it. I just assume that people, talk to individuals like yourselves on a regular basis, or talk to researchers, toxicologists, at different institutions across Canada and the United States. We still do, we need to get better at ensuring that if we're going to provide information and provide resources, we need to ensure that those resources meet the end users. And that's on us as leaders within our respective organizations, that we need to ensure that we do that. But one of the biggest things is, how do we ensure that you guys have the resources to do your work for us?
Can I respond to that? Just a quick response, and thank you for that, that wouldn't it be great statement. About your point about the time it takes to do research and the value of research to the people we're all here to support and serve. One of the models that's a new thing for me and many, I'm sure many other academics, is the lived experience model. And I think that closes the gap between research and taking research from the academy, where we're sitting tonight, out into the community, because we have folks on our team that are not there as gratuitous, sort of casual, have a casual involvement in the study. They're involved in the actual development of the research protocol, rolling it out and making sense of the data that we get back. So I think that might close the research to action gap. I'm just on my baby steps with my first lived experience study, but so far it looks like it's going to be able to accomplish that. So one strategy.
Hillary, wouldn't it be great if?
I think it would be great if we could have, more peer support in regards to families. I do sit on our peer support group within my company, but maybe as a member of our paramedic association who does promote and advocate for our profession, to maybe partner essentially with, our company and hopefully other organizations in the future for these maybe peer support opportunities, and maybe at the different functions that we plan, whether it's at a conference or we do some family-based events as well to celebrate, maybe like a paramedic week that just recently happened, like last week. At those events, we could talk to the families that are there and hand out, whether it is a website or a QR code to take you to the website, of all of the resources that are available. I think if we, especially as a board, maybe come together, and that could be a little project of ours, to just get the word out there of what's actually available, and to let families know that there is help and there is options for some guidance through this journey.
Thank you. Okay, Sarah, wouldn't it be great if?
Wouldn't it be great if, basically, I feel like I'm going to be mirroring what you guys are saying, but what came to mind was, wouldn't it be great if the organization had family at the table, quote unquote. It's very much what you were saying as well. I have done a lot of work on trying to engage families. I can do what I can do, but really, if it was the service or organization's priority, it would be easier. It would be right at the beginning. It would be a family group or peer support, like you're saying. We do have some family members on our peer support, but it would be lovely if the service made it a priority, and it was just like we talked about. They're not an extension of that member. They are part of the service. And so for me, even when I think about when I'm assisting members back to work after they've been off for a while, whether it's WSIB or LTD, or the reintegration process, I want the family of that member to be part of the reintegration, it to be very much a holistic and community outlook on how things. So for me, it would be that the organization gave a lot more thought into how the family can be part of this service.
Okay, so thanks to everyone. A parting, concluding thought from me as we wrap up is really how the Garnet Families Partnership, this is the plan of how we can create this collective impact, this collective vision, and enact an ability to really advance knowledge that meets the really important priority needs of the community. Those priorities would be built with the community, and to really strengthen the partnership and the relationships among and across the jurisdiction so we can share this information more easily, more readily, and reach the families, to see the families structurally included in these conversations from the research design to the research execution. And so, we are actively looking for folks to serve on the Families Council within Garnet Families Governance. And I think that one of the most important things that we're doing is having the long vision of building the capacity within the community to really be able to respond to these needs. And that is really the intention behind the Family Science Summer Institute. So I'd really like to thank Mount St. Vincent for being an incredible host this week. They're an incredibly important part of the entire endeavor. And thanks to Dr. Deborah Norris for all of her leadership in family science, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. Thank you. I think that's, yeah, so live stream is done? Yeah? 9 o'clock on the dot, so there you go. Yes. Thanks, everyone. And we're still available for questions if you have others that you want to ask in person.
Great job.
Yeah.
No need
Thanks
for
so
nerves,
much.
you're a natural.
Thank you.
So no need for nerves, she's a natural.
I don't know about that. I was kind of like, my husband's like, oh no.
No, you did great.